Welcome to Real Money, Real Life, the podcast where we get real about money and the messy human stuff that comes with it. I'm Linda Grizely, financial educator and your Me Money guide to financial clarity. Each week, we dive into financial concepts and money strategies, but we always tie it back to real life, emotions, mindset, and how money actually shows up day to day. If you're ready for practical tools, mindset shifts, and honest conversations that meet you where you are, not where the world thinks you should be, you're in the right place. Because you deserve to feel confident with your money and good about how you use it. No judgment, no lectures, and definitely no putting yourself last.
Hello, everyone. If you're listening, you are one of the real ones, the ones who want to protect the people and peace of mind that matter the most. Today, we're going to talk about estate planning, not as a legal checklist, but as a love letter to the people you care about most. My guest, attorney Tamara Marshall, helps individuals and families protect their people, property, and peace of mind through thoughtful, personalized estate planning. We'll talk about how to make planning simple instead of intimidating, what every family should have in place, and how small, proactive steps can prevent big problems later. Tamara is a compassionate and experienced attorney whose mission is to provide solutions, not stress. She helps individuals and families protect what matters most, their people, property, and peace of mind. Whether you're planning your own legacy, assisting aging parents, or preparing a young adult for independence, Tamara makes estate planning simple, clear, and tailored to your needs. Hello, Tamara, and welcome.
Hi, Linda. Thanks for having me on.
Of course, I'm looking forward to this conversation. Such an important part of financial planning. And one of the basic things that financial planners, always tell their clients to do, but sometimes it just doesn't get done. So we're going to talk about all the reasons why people need to make this a priority.
Yep.
But first, I want to understand what made you decide to focus on estate planning.
It was just kind of a natural progression of my career. I started my career in litigation, and as that progressed, I've found that it wasn't that meaningful for me because I get my satisfaction out of helping people, and being involved in litigation. While it can be critical for some people, it just wasn't what I got satisfaction out of. So I sort of morphed into working with older people and their estate plans and expanded from elder law just generally to estate planning.
And so you transitioned from litigation to elder planning to estate planning. And for our listeners, I think that we should probably define what the difference is between elder and estate planning in the form of law. So go ahead and give us a little background on that.
Okay, so elder planning and estate planning coexist. They're just at a different phase in life, really. When you're older, your kids are grown, maybe you have grandkids, your estate plan isn't going to change all that much. But when you're younger, either you're going to college or progressing along, now you have a family, young children, now you're worried about, well, God forbid something happens to me. How are my kids going to be okay? So you kind of go from that college age to, raising your children age and making sure they're provided for in your estate plan, to elder law planning, which is basically passing on wealth to the next generation.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That does give us context. So my next question is, why do you think so many people avoid or delay getting their estate planning done?
Oh, that's an easy one because nobody wants to think about dying. I talk about it every day, really, as part of what I do. So I'm fairly comfortable about talking about it, but most people don't want to think about it. I find that frequently when somebody comes in, it's either because I'm helping them with an estate administration, meaning somebody has passed away and they need help with it. And frequently that will make them think about, oh, what planning have I done? If they're having a hard time and their parents didn't plan, they don't want to cause that kind of stress for the people they leave behind. So definitely people want to avoid thinking about death, but I'm kind of a firm believer in, hey, we all know we're gonna die someday, but if you have the plans in place, then You won't need it untimely, but it'll be there if your loved ones need it.
Yeah, I have found that in the clients that I work with, the ones that are motivated to get their estate planning done are the ones who've experienced something firsthand from a family member that they've had to deal with, or they know someone who has, and it ends up being a disaster. And they're like, oh my gosh, I need to get this done. And then they prioritize it. But usually it takes something happening to trigger them to say, like, I really need to do this.
Yeah, that's absolutely what I find as well.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you make legal planning approachable and less intimidating. Tell me more about how you do that.
Well, I think to start with, the term estate planning is intimidating when people hear estate. They think you have to have lots and lots of money. Um, and what I explain to people is estate is just a lawyer's term for what do you have? What do you own? Like if you have $5 in your pocket, then you have an estate worth at least $5, right? We all have an estate. So let's not think that you have to have lots and lots of money to need an estate plan. So that's one way of making it approachable, is kind of explaining what that term means. And then also explaining that we're just talking about documents. Most people are familiar with a will, right? It's just a document with rules about what happens when you pass away. But there are all kinds of documents that go along with an estate plan. That's just one of them. So they're just documents.
Yeah, let's go ahead and jump right into what those documents are then. So maybe elaborate a little bit on a will and then go from there.
Okay, so I can kind of give you my estate planning 101, which is generally how I approach folks when I'm talking to them for the first time. So, like I said, everybody understands a will, or most everybody, that it's a document with rules about what happens when you pass away. So, the next the next level is to add a trust into that. So, a trust, again, is a term people hear, but I don't think they really understand. A trust is also just a document with rules. It's a more comprehensive document. It has a section of rules about what happens to your trust assets while you're alive and well, which is generally you're in full control of them. Just like you can put assets in your trust, you can take them out, you can get rid of the trust altogether. Then there's a section of rules about what happens to the trust assets if you're alive but incapacitated, unable to manage your finances for some reason. So there's a set of rules about that, and then a set of rules about what happens to your trust assets when you pass away. So it's a more comprehensive document that applies throughout our lives. Hopefully that middle part doesn't ever need to be implemented, right? But it's there if we need it. So that's the basic two documents, a will and a trust. There are also documents that are going to go along with any good estate plan, which are powers of attorney. So that those documents apply when you're alive, but you're incapacitated in some manner. So you need a power of attorney for healthcare, who's going to make your healthcare decisions for you if you're unable to, and a power of attorney for property, who's going to manage your assets that are outside your trust if you're unable to.
Okay, so that's pretty basic. Just those things there. And so you mentioned a little bit about estate planning changing across different stages of life, right?
Mm-hmm.
So does that matter, like what stage of life you're in, if you need a trust, or how does that change throughout the different stages?
So let's start with an 18-year-old just going to college. They need an estate plan mainly because uh, of those powers of attorney that I discussed, right? They're going to college. What if they get into a car accident? How are their parents going to get information about them? The only way that's going to happen is if they have a healthcare power of attorney, because now they're of age and the medical personnel are not just free to share information, right? Property power of attorney might be less important, but as long as you're going to do one, I'm always going to do both of them. So it starts at that age when you become an adult, when you're really not fully adulting just yet, so that your parents can still help you out. So then the next phase, I would say, again, you you get married or move on, have children. Now you need to address your estate plan to the needs of the children in your estate plan. So then you're going to add provisions in your will for guardians of your children. So once you've launched your kids, and then still the provisions about what's going to happen to your assets if you're incapacitated, what's going to happen to your assets when you pass away. Those are probably not going to change a whole lot, but they're still there. Important to help your family avoid probate, which is really a main universal objective when people do estate planning, is to try to avoid probate.
All right. So tell us what exactly probate is and why we would want to avoid it.
So probate is a court process. I would say a main misconception people have about when they have a will is that having a will avoid probate. Not necessarily true. So probate is a court process where the court appoints a person to follow the rules in your will, right? Because a will is a document with rules. Or if you don't have an estate plan at all, then your estate's definitely going to end up in probate, because if you don't have an estate plan, then the law tells us who's going to receive your assets when you pass away. So basically the probate process is you file a petition, some other documents that the court needs to see to establish who is entitled to your estate, and then the court will issue letters of office. Those are literally just a document that say letters of office, and now you have authority to follow the rules in the will or the rules of the law if somebody's passed away without an estate plan. Speaking of things people don't know, in Illinois, if you pass away without an estate plan and you're married, it's a common misconception to think that your spouse is going to get 100% of your estate. That's not true. Your spouse will get 50%, and if you have children, they will share the other 50%. So I just want to throw that out there. But the reason people like to avoid probate is because it's a court process. So by its nature, it's out of your control. The timeline depends on the court, not the needs of what's going on with your estate. Plus, there's additional costs. A probate is almost always going to cost more than for a non-complex estate, which covers most of us. A probate is always going to cost more than just doing some planning in advance.
Okay. So the will doesn't avoid probate, but it helps. It's going to make it less complicated.
Right. It means that you get to decide who gets your assets, not
Right.
the law.
And so tell us about a trust. Does a trust help you avoid probate more than a will does?
It does. So I'm going to use I'm going to grab my prop here because I like to use this prop when I'm
All right.
explaining a trust to people. So like I said before, a trust is just a document with rules, right? It has rules about what happens to your assets when you're alive and well, if you're incapacitated, when you pass away. So here I have a pen holder. So let's think of this pen holder as your trust. It's a document with rules, right? Let's think of these pens as your assets. So you can have a fantastic trust, but if all your assets are outside the trust, it doesn't do you any good, right? So we want to put the assets in the trust by various methods, depending on what the assets are. Now that they're in the trust, the rules of the trust apply. So we don't need the court. We look to the trust. What are the rules? And that is how your assets get distributed.
That makes sense. So for those of you who are just listening, if you picture a cup or a pen holder, and that is the rules of the trust, and then you have pens laying outside the trust, then they're not binded by the trust and they are not subject to the rules of the trust. They may go to probate. But once you put the pens into the trust, or you put your assets into the name of the trust, then they are inside of the trust, and then they are protected from probate. Right?
Exactly. Because
Got it.
we always follow the rules of the trust, and the court doesn't get involved in that.
Great. So now we know what probate is. We know how we might be able to avoid it. Are there any other misconceptions that are common with wills or trusts that you wish people understood?
I think that is the main one. And let me elaborate as to why it's a misconception. So, like I said, a will is a document with rules about what happens when you pass away. So, the most common asset that will require a probate, even if you have a trust, is real estate, your home. So, let's talk about what is actually in your probate estate. So, if you have a trust with assets in it, we already discussed the rules of the trust control what happens to the assets when you pass away. So that's not going to be in your probate estate. If you have bank accounts, for instance, an IRA or a 401k, those, as long as they have beneficiaries, are going to get passed on according to who your beneficiary is. So really what ends up in your probate estate is an asset that has no other way to pass, right? We need to look to your will to find out what the rules are, because it's not in a trust and there's no pay on death beneficiary. So those are the assets that end up with transferring with the rules of your will. So let's say you have a house, you own it jointly with a spouse or somebody else, and something happens to both of you at the same time. Now we have an asset that has no way to pass. That's when we have to look to the will and open a probate estate. So a will can help you. A will is better than nothing. Don't get me wrong. A will can help. If you have a will and then you have beneficiaries on all your other assets, but generally speaking, if you have a house or any real estate, best thing to do is a trust.
So I just want to clarify if there's anything that you can put in the trust and you have a trust, you should put it in the trust. Like the house title should be in the name of the trust.
Correct.
I mean, generally speaking, obviously there's going to be like different circumstances for individual people that might warrant something different, and then you want to make sure that all of your beneficiaries are set up on any accounts that will allow for beneficiaries or payable on death. Make sure that those are set up and going to the right person. And anytime that you have a change of circumstance in your life, a marriage, a divorce, another child, you want to revisit those. Um, so you just want to make sure that you're getting beneficiaries set up and other items put into the trust if you have one. And if you have all of that set up properly, you might be able to avoid probate.
If you have all that set up properly, you will avoid probate.
All right, great. And you did mention rules for the state of Illinois. So I want to just let our listeners know if you live in a different state, each state has very specific rules about what happens if you die without a will. Sometimes it goes to your spouse, sometimes it goes to your spouse and your kids. And then there's also things that happen like if you don't have a spouse, then what happens? Does it go to your kids? Does it go to your parents? Does it go to your siblings? So you'll want to look at what the rules are for your state as far as that goes. But more importantly, just get your documents done, right?
Yeah,
Then you don't have to
absolutely.
worry. Then you don't have to let the state decide for you. You get to decide by
Yes,
putting it all in writing.
exactly.
All right. So let's talk about that emotional side of planning, the part where you said people don't like to talk about dying. How do you help people get through that emotional side and really focus on the practical part of it?
With a little humor, hopefully. I mean, it's inevitable when you're having a conversation that in conversation, I'm killing off my clients that are sitting across the table from me. I always say, sorry, this is my job. I have to come up with these disaster scenarios because this is how we think through it. And almost always they laugh at that. So,
Yeah.
they've already realized that that's why they're here. Um,
I,
yeah, a little humor and, I don't know. I think I'm just pretty easygoing and people feel comfortable with me. So I can't tell you how many times when I've finished up somebody's estate plan, they've said, wow, this wasn't that bad. I really should have done this a long time ago.
yeah.
It's just really for most of us, obviously, if you have a more complex estate, there are levels of complexity that go into your estate planning too. Um, but generally speaking, it's just I mean, not generally speaking even. It really they're just documents. It's just documents.
Right.
Nobody should be intimidated by them.
Yeah. I think that I mean, I used to kill off people in financial planning all the time too, because you wanna know what happens. If one of you passes away, what happens? So I would
Right.
kill people off. Like, you walk out the door and one of you gets hit by a
The
bus, right?
bus. Yeah.
Which is I every time I say that, I have a cousin who actually did get hit by a bus. She's alive and well and everything's fine, but every time I say that, I think about that. But anyway, so I think that having the conversation is so important, even though it's hard. And
Mhm.
you're right. Once everything is done and everything is set, wow, it actually feels like a relief because you're like, okay, now you know everybody's going to be taken care of and you know what's going to happen.
Common reaction, and you're not leaving a huge burden for people to figure out, when they're already upset
Yeah.
because they've lost a loved one.
Yeah. And I think also that sometimes it's even harder for people that have more complicated things, like when there's been blended families, and they're trying to figure out like what they would do with this or what they would do with that. And I think that's hard too. Do you have a system for helping people figure that out? Or is that really just all on them? Like you just say, you figure it out and you tell me what you want. Or do you have any useful tools?
I mean, we just talk through it. The thing with blended families is you're gonna probably have different rules about what happens to your assets when you pass away. There's all kinds of options for that. So, um, definitely just having a conversation, finding out what their goals and priorities are for their surviving spouse and then for their children. It's common, obviously, divorce is common, blended families are common. We're experienced attorneys, and you just walk through each scenario and make sure that they can articulate their their goals, maybe with a little help, um, and then implement them in their documents.
Yeah, I think it can be overwhelming, but having someone to talk through it with you, I mean, that's kind of the point of having, talking it through with your attorney or with your planner, whether it be a estate planning attorney or your financial planner that's helping you figure out where things might go.
Right.
Um,
Usually a
it's
combo. I
it's
love to
usually a
have
combo.
I love to have a team, like, when I can just be a lawyer, okay? I just wanna be a lawyer. You do the financial stuff there, Linda.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that, having people to help you, like having someone help you with your money to figure out like, okay, these are the accounts that you have, and these are the ones that have beneficiaries, and then these are the ones that don't. And then taking that information to your attorney to help you put together those documents. And I think you have some sort of a a I don't know, a form or something that you have people complete that helps them figure out what those things are?
Sure, I almost have every attorney, and this is how I start the process, is you fill out a questionnaire. You identify yourself, whether there's a spouse or significant other, partner, children, so you identify them. Then you start thinking about who are my VIPs in my estate plan? Like, who's gonna make my decisions for me if I can't make them? Who's gonna take care of my kids? So you just have to kind of think about that. And it asks all those things in the questionnaire. I just tell people, fill out what you can. And when we have our consultation, then we'll talk about your questions. And a lot of times I end up filling things in as we go. Some people have it all figured out, and some people need that extra conversation and my experience to think of things that they might not think of, or answer their questions before they can make a decision. And that's what I'm here for.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay. So when I think of estate planning, because I talk about it almost every day too, right? When I talk about it, I think of it as an act of love or a way to get peace of mind to know that my loved ones are taken care of. But so many people associate it with death. And part of the thing I like to talk about on my podcast is about mindsets and internal obstacles. And I feel like that's one of them. What do you see? Do you see that that's the same thing? Like, do you try to reframe it for them or tell me more about that?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, like I said, I think that it's just a preparation you do in the normal course of life. And then if you get it done, you're not going to need it untimely. That's my theory. um, so it's just something you do. Like you pay your bills. You know, not everything that we do in life is fun, but we do it for a purpose. And estate planning is for the purpose of caring for our loved ones when we're gone, right? We can't, when we're gone, we can't care for them, but we can certainly not leave them a mess and not um, make things more complicated than they need to be. So it's just part of adulting, I think. Just it's part of your checklist. I think we need to get away from thinking that we're all, well, I won't need it for until I'm 80 or whatever. Yeah, ideally that's the case. Some people come in, they're like, well, my kids are in college now. I'm going to do my estate plan. I say, well, okay, you made the ultimate deadline, right? So, because if they come in the door and they're like, oh, I should have done this a long time ago, you're not going to get a guilt trip from me because you've met the ultimate deadline, which is you're still here to do it. So good for you.
Yeah. Do you have any stories that you would like to share, obviously just generalized, about things that might help people understand how important it is?
Not specifically, but generally, um, when there are no plans in place, that leaves the door open for conflict because it leaves a void and questions. And if you don't fill that void in advance with your own answers, then that creates conflict. So I've seen situations where um, families have a lot of conflict over what's going to happen to somebody's remains, right? That's something we haven't talked about yet. It's not just about money. What's going to happen to my remains? People have all kinds of different beliefs and significance that they place on that issue. And the best thing you can do is remove that as a controversy and put it down in writing what you want to have happen. Because when you put that in your will, it's enforceable, right? It takes that conflict off the table. If, for instance, if you're going to, in your estate plan, not treat your children equally, but there's a specific purpose for it, then I think your estate plan is a perfect reason to explain that. Um, Maybe it's obvious that one has more resources than the other, but to see that I love you equally, here's why I'm doing this, I think can go a long way to not creating bad feelings where there shouldn't be bad feelings. So I guess I'm answering your question sort of in a roundabout way is more where I see conflict where there isn't instruction and I see less conflict where there are clear instructions so that everybody can get along and support each other and just follow the rules in the document.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I can see if there's nothing spelled out, people have different ideas of what they think the person would have wanted or what they think should be done. And yeah, it could be it could be really complicated. If you have people that have differing opinions on what should be done, especially with remains. Oh my
Yes.
gosh, and how heartbreaking is that to think that you have to have that conversation and that argument, so to speak, when you're grieving. So, super important to get this done. All right. So, Tamara, tell us who needs to find you. Who's your ideal client and what states do you serve, et cetera?
I'm licensed in Illinois, so I can certainly help folks that are in Illinois. My firm, Kelleher and Holland, has offices in Florida, Texas. We have attorneys that are licensed in many, many states. But I personally am licensed in Illinois, so my my ideal clients are anybody 18 years and up who needs some help, or maybe even their parents who want to do their own estate plan and throw in some powers of attorney for their younger kids who are off to college. So, like I said, everybody who has an estate, which is all of us. I don't have minimums. I'm here to help whoever needs it.
Great. And what's the best way for them to find you?
The best way to find me, I would recommend, is go to my firm's website, kelleherholland.com, and you can link to me in there, and I'm happy to help you.
Great. And I will include those links in our show notes. So thank you so much for joining me, Tamara. This has been a great conversation. And hopefully we've sparked someone out there, some of our listeners, to go ahead and go get these things done. Appreciate you coming on today.
Well, thanks for the invitation. I've enjoyed talking to you.
Wonderful. All right, everyone. I am creating a community, a space for real talk, fresh starts, and women who are done putting themselves last. So check the show notes for that and come join me there. And if you're still here, you are one of the real ones, the ones that matters. And here is my closing nugget for you. Estate planning isn't about fear. It's about love. It's about caring for the people that you love, even when you can't be there. Thanks for listening.
Thanks so much for listening to Real Money, Real Life. Want to see what's blocking you from financial confidence or discover your money personality? Head to the resources page at lindagriz.com for our free quizzes. That's LINDAGRIZ.com/resources. If you're loving what you're learning, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. I'm your Me Money Guide to Financial Clarity, Linda Grizely, and I'll catch you next time as we talk more real money, real life, because you deserve to feel confident with your money and good about how you spend it. The content shared here is for educational and entertainment purposes only. It is not financial, tax, legal, or planning advice and does not constitute therapy or mental health counseling. Please consult an actively licensed and qualified professional for advice or help specific to your situation.